Okay, let's jump into it. 11:41 on the 3rd of July. So yeah, woof, we we had ADP overnight, and wow, that was a shocker. It's a lot of sort of missing targets of the sort of data. There's a big sea of red, obviously, sort of things not really hitting their marks. But the one I'm talking about here is ADP, which came in at negative 33, and the previous one was actually rounded down from 37 down to 29. Obviously, we're expecting that, 2.5 times sort of kick up kind of thing, but negative 33 is just shocking. That's the lowest, I think they said the lowest print in 2 years. I don't know how far back this is going to go. Look, we can go back here and we can see what the numbers are being printed. I mean, gee, 497. Woof. Geez, wow, wow. But, I mean, you go back here, minus 301. I mean, a couple of these outliers here, but certainly, look, you know what I mean. Negative numbers are not the norm by any mean in that, and we haven't had a negative number since, well, I guess, where was it, that 301, so 22. So, yeah, look, it's, 3.5 years almost that we've had a sort of negative number. And this is not good for look sort of for the broader sort of picture of it all, but certainly in regards to sort of what they may potentially be doing with uh, cutting rates over in America. I mean, look, NFP is the big one. ADP is like a bit of a precursor. It used to sort of say, oh, look, it's going to give you an idea, but I think it's so hit and a miss in the sense of, if you have a bad one here, NFP is going to be a bad one. Sometimes they correlate, sometimes they just don't. They go opposite. Like, I don't think it's enough to sort of say that, okay, that's a shocking number, so NFP is going to be a shocking number. NFP is going to be the bigger, more sort of number that the market's paying attention to. And this seems to have dropped a little bit more because I'm sure we were expecting 120 or so yesterday. Anyway, expecting a little bit of a slowdown here. If it follows suit and we get some incredibly low number, sub 50, sub 60, sub 7, probably even sub 100, I think that's going to really impact things. And you're going to see a lot of people sort of saying, look, that's it, bang, this is what Powell was saying. That's what he needed to sort of say that they're going to cut, and you're going to see the cut expectations for July, which is end of this month now, because obviously we're in July now, but I think the actual decision is at the end of this month. Um, that the calls for the cut there are going to sort of ramp up. So it's looking like a pretty much, I mean, look, nothing's a sure thing, but looking like a pretty much sure thing in September. So there's no decision there's no meeting in August. But at the moment, it's been slowly creeping up percentage wise, expectation percentage wise for July. And obviously, sort of in July, okay, we've just got a bit of China data coming out here. 2 seconds. All right. Yeah, so pretty low impact in that, but again, look, just missing the mark. And this one, so there's a sea of red. Sort of a lot of people sort of seem to be over expecting or forecasting what they think the data may sort of come out as. But anyway, back to what I was saying with the expectations for the cut in July. I mean, they've been creeping up, and I think sort of like each time you sort of see people seem to get onto these things, like you never really hear about it too much, and then all of a sudden every person that's commenting on anything says it. Hence, I am now as well. But that sort of crept up to about 27% or so. And like Powell will say something, it'll go from 20 to 25, and then something will happen, it'll go to 27, and blah, blah, blah. So basically, it's just sort of saying that you know they're saying it's priced in too the thing. And look, I do get this, and I 100% agree with it. The idea of sort of pricing these things in, but US dollar has been bashed so hard. Is a cut really going to be? I mean, look, you could say yes, there's a 27% chance of them sort of cutting, but it's really going to be a massive shock if they do. And well, apparently 27% chance of it. So yeah, there is more downside with the US dollar in that should they cut at the end of this month. But we'll see what happens with it all. And as I said, look, NFP tonight is going to be a mover. And US dollar had a little bit of a push up yesterday. It's come back. It's actually sort of retesting its breakout level currently of a very small sort of low time frame sort of channel. But yeah, we'll sort of get onto the charts and have a look at that in a sec. Just had a bit of Caxton service PMI. Oh, so just before that, we had Aussie data coming out here as well. So we had revised down. Actually, that's a fairly big revision down as well. So revised down. Expectation was above 5 billion, came in at 2.24. That is a big miss to the downside. I did actually sort of see a post 2 seconds ago. Uh, it's on live score here. So they've got the sort of breakdown of the trade balance here. So obviously, as we can see, it's sort of like previous. That, as I said, that got revised down. Big miss to the downside there, but it breaks down here. So we can see that sort of exports have sort of dropped down a little bit there already, but our imports have really sort of ramped up in this sort of case. So obviously that sort of balance really sort of ballooned out with it all. But again, look, when exports coming in a little bit slower. I heard a while ago that sort of, I think it was 66 cents was supposedly don't quote me on this, that that was supposedly the level that sort of like, ideal for the Aussie in that, in which the currency is cheap enough that sort of people want to buy from us, strong enough that sort of we able to sort of purchase things without sort of getting too sort of strained on it all. As to whether that's true or not, well, we'll see how we go. But I guess the idea is that if exports are going down, yeah, you could sort of maybe sort of chalk it up to sort of some of this sort of tariff fear kind of sort of stuff, but I don't know. At the same time, it didn't really have a massive impact on Aussie. I mean, it's not a market shaping kind of thing. Again, it's just one of those bits of data that you plug in there. But that is a significant miss to the downside. That, as you can see, it was mainly made up because we've been ramping up our imports, probably because the Aussie dollar's sort of been holding up a little bit better recently, and the US dollar's been, well, just so pathetically weak. Um, Moving on, we had Caxton Services PMIs just come out as a moment ago. And again, look, 50 is still in that expansionary sort of side of things, but obviously a little bit of a drop off from what they were expecting. Again, it's not really a massive sort of market mover. Impact seems very minimal on yuan and Aussie being the sort of proxy of China sort of data. Again, 2, 3 pips or so. So it's not really doing a great deal there. Other sort of news overnight, I guess the sort of bigger one was there was a trade deal that was announced with Vietnam. That seems to be the big thing that really got everybody pumping up because I was watching after ADP last night and market, I'll get it to on the charts, but market was flipping up and down. It kind of shook off that really bad print pretty quickly. But then after a while, it sort of like pretty much when the US sessions open, I have to see what time that trade deal was announced. But really, we saw. Actually, no, it must have been a little bit later because gold wouldn't have appreciated on that. Gold got sold down on Asia Open. But yeah, everything sort of picked up and sort of ran, and US dollar sold right off in that. So after, pretty much when US sessions open, so that after that ADP data. So it'll be again, look, it's just mainly just looking forward to the NFP tonight to sort of see how the market, see what print we get, and also how the market sort of digests that. In terms of data sort of coming out through the rest of today, oh, that's right, with the Vietnam trade deal, I think they settled on 20% tariff, which I think sort of is a lot higher than what they were. Again, look, I'm just regurgitating what I've sort of read, but I think that was 3% was pretty much where they were at. Then, of course, we had the big sort of Liberation Day and everybody's at 30 or 40% or whatever the hell it was. And so it's kind of like, okay, settled at 20. And I think that's the sort of thing. I mean, there's no sort of like, oh my God, wow, this negotiating tactics with stuff. I've seen these things before, sort of like, okay, you're at 3%. Let's make it 40. Okay, you know what? I'm a nice guy. I'll come down from 40. I'll meet you halfway. We make it 20. You know what I mean? Oh wow, look at me. I'm getting a discount from not from 40. But you just jacked it up through the roof. I mean, you may as well made it 100 and then sort of brought it down to 40. You know what I mean? Like, so there's no sort of like sort of shocking like wow, amazing kind of deals there, but is what it is. Sets a framework for other people because there hasn't really been too many deals signed. I don't think there's a lot of sort of back and forth. I know the big one that they're talking about at the moment. I mean, China's obviously the big one, but that's kind of gone on to the back burner when they sort of just went back and forth and back and forth, and they're like, okay, we'll both chill out for a little bit. So Japan seems to be the big one that they're sort of talking about at the moment, and I think Japan are pretty sort of stubborn with it all. I think they're just like, yeah, and look, the yuan shocking, but of course you got to remember Japan is one of the sort of like sort of superpower economies, and has been for a very long time, even with their sort of faltering what's it now, 10 or 20 or 30 years or so, that they've kind of been stagnant. But they are still, not somebody you can just sort of push around with it all. They're not these, Vietnams. They're not these Cambodias, these kind of things. So, they've got a little bit more sort of punch when it comes to the negotiating table. But I think that's the big one that the market's kind of looking at currently at the moment. And of course, you got Albo. Albo can't even sort of get a sit down and can't even get a meeting with Trump. I think he's getting a little bit of flack locally for that kind of stuff as well. Anyway, moving on through the rest of the day, we've got a couple of PMIs sort of coming through the rest of the day, nothing sort of massively of note. As I said, NFP is kind of what we're looking for, a little bit of a slowing down here. Another one to sort of keep an eye on is the employment claims. We did have a small tick down last week, but again, look, it's looking to sort of like ramp up just a little bit. But it is that kind of theme where, it's slowly ticking up, ticking up, ticking up, ticking up. Was last week just a bit of an outlier with 236 to sort of come down, and now it's back up into the 240s. And, you can see that sort of trajectory is kind of moving in this direction to the top side here. And I think that's another thing that people are really sort of worried about. Like jobs is really seems to be the main sort of talking point at the moment. Tariffs, they're all still going on in the background, and this is really why it's been so difficult to you know what I mean, sort of buy and hold and trade a position recently because you're trying to balance what's happening with the tariffs, what's happening with the war, and what's happening then with the jobs. And then I mean inflation, at least for the time being, is taking a back seat. But these are all big market moving, market shifting, shaping sort of factors. And they're jumping and going back and forth every couple of days. Well, certainly the tariffs and the war are. So anyway, move on. We also have ISM services later on as well, and US kind of again, it still needs to keep producing and showing that it's firing on some fronts because inflation's down, that's fine. If job numbers are shocking, you at least want to be able to, be producing some decent numbers. If you start to fail here, inflation's down as well. Well, that's pretty much opening the door to cuts sooner rather than later because you need to stimulate the economy. And it's a balancing act. You need to stimulate the side of the market. You need to get more people employed. You need to get sort of these numbers back up. And how do you do that? Well, in a very sort of loose way, you sort of, your lower rates make it easier for people to borrow, and then to sort of innovate and sort of employ more people and produce more, basically, and sort of push the market forward. So this is why these are going to be quite sort of crucial bits of data. And then, of course, tomorrow we got what it was Independence Day over in the US, so markets might be a little bit sort of quiet through there. So it's going to be a little bit of firework later tonight. So have a look at DXY first because it seems to be flavor of the month for a while at the moment, and we can see that sort of like certainly like I was saying yesterday that this level would be interesting, and I was sort of wondering sort of like because they're just bailing out, they're not sort of it's as you can see, there's no sort of nice structural support resistance kind of thing down here. They're kind of just sort of like, okay, breaks out, there's no retest here, and just goes straight down. So I was thinking maybe they're already bailing out, but as you can see, their support turned into its resistance. So it did play the game, as in support resistance with it all. But this is where we were firing up into. And look, the day wasn't looking too bad for US dollar here. Had that sort of potential inverted head and shoulders with this little flare up over here, sort of wonky shoulder, but neckline being here, that pretty much worked out to a measured move through there. But what we sort of saw as the data came out, we got this big sort of sell down. I get into a lower time frame, you can see this. Where was it? Just here where the data came out. Shocking number. Market sells down. That's an expected reaction. Within 15 minutes, it was back up, taking out the high, and then pushing up around this zone. And then as we can see, sort of, this is what, 12 o'clock, 12:30, 12:45, just as sort of like US markets kind of opening, bang, and they just smashed into it. And it hasn't really done much since. A little bit of a lower time frame wedge sort of forming here. Put this alert just back up over this line here, and we'll give this a little bit of a thing. Set down. We're going to call this down. So above 96, where we're at 96.83, call that. I mean, we're really getting down into the finicky numbers here when we're doing it on 15-minute timeframes. But point is that this is obviously an area that was sort of marked out. It's been resistance, 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 support, whatever. You want to see it back up and sort of playing in this area here, sort of bouncing between 96.85s and 97.10, whatever, these sort of things here. So look, if this were to be, I'm not a big fan of this. Look, it's 15-minute time frame. You've only really got a couple of touches here, maybe. Up above 96.80, 485, whatever. I think you might see a little bit more of a push-up recovery here. I mean, RSI, again, this is 15 minutes, so you can't really hold too much onto it. But look, we did sort of get this breakout. This is your breakout level here as well. So this is what I was saying before. Where's that little line thing going? So here, that's kind of your breakout level there. What am I? So really, as you can see, as it's kind of broken out, whether this be up a point or whatever, this kind of area here, this is where it's broken out back to, it's really just come back and retested that breakout level. So structurally in that, that's okay. But what, as I said, this is why you want to see it actually, people go, okay, look, this is a breakout level, that's fine. Let's buy it back up. You want to see that continued movement back up here. If it fails at this level here, well, really you're just sort of going to be dancing around these sort of like 96.40s. Maybe you get some support here, but I would say more likely you're going to be coming back testing these lows. This is not where you want to be for US dollar, down the bottom here, coming into this potential shocking print of NFP. Because as you can see, sort of like prior to ADP, because the number was expected to be a little bit stronger, we saw the market move up a little bit with it. And it was quite odd price action, the fact that it shook it off so quickly over there. Obviously, again, look, as the US markets open, they sort of hammered down into it. But you kind of would have expected, and this is what I find is interesting with this. I mean, that was a shocking number. I mean, sentiment's shocking. Everything's rotten with the US at the moment. Well, most things are rotten. They're selling the crap out of it. If they wanted to just bail that right down, well, that's just as good as excuse as anything. But they didn't. And that's what I find interesting about these data drops sometimes. And it's not just necessarily, okay, yes, this is how that bit of data is, or whichever, whatever. It's how the market sort of digests it. And, what I tend to find with these sort of things, if the market can take on this new bit of data and they still go, hey, you know what, I'm happy to hold it here. Yes, okay, it came down here afterwards and shit. We get that because, that was when the other part of the market. But, if the market can take on the new bit of negative data and still maintain, I think there's more to unpack with that. And so if we can sort of get back up around, look, it was moving up sort of when we were expecting halfway decent data, shocking data. Okay, bang, you come back down. That's fine. It's expecting slightly slower numbers today. So I'd be surprised if you get too much of a push back up. But, as I said, look, if they can sort of digest some sort of bad data and still move it up a little bit, I think there's at least starving off death for now. Call that. That's about the best you can look for the US dollar at the moment. It's just the sentiment is just so rotten. It's just been hammered so unbelievably bad. I mean, I think I covered it yesterday. It was like, it's from that big sort of like where we're calling the big breakout point. I think what did we drop, like 3% or something? Bang. Yeah, 3%. From that sort of attempted breakout. That was like sort of a high time frame, weekly. We're about to flip. Everything was looking rosy. Wow, about kind of rosy, like we had a bottom, and it's just been smashed ever since. So again, that's going to be interesting whenever we get back up over there. But anyway, look, where we're at now is down in the 90, what are we at, 96, 97 kind of area. If we see a little bit of a rally push back up over here, again, look, you're going to be back up to sort of testing this level. This is where we know the sellers are. Most likely we're going to get it capped here again. If we do get up there, this is the next level that we're looking for. I don't see it necessarily seeing a super rush, particularly while we've got NFP up later tonight, and also the numbers are supposed to be a little bit on the slower side. But certainly if you're up around this area, it gives you area for them to sell it back down to potentially try and bounce up. the problem is that if you're already on your knees and then you get the bad numbers, you're going to be shooting down, and that's probably going to push you down into maybe 95s. So we'll see how it goes. At the moment, structurally testing that back test level above sort of 96, 85, whatever. You could potentially see a little bit of a push up sort of through the session. But apart from that, it's not a great deal to report on it. Aussie, interesting sort of, so with that data, as we saw sort of like, where was I? I think it was around this point here. Aussie was already sort of settling down a bit, sort of came down here, moved up on the NFP data, and then as we saw, they had a second effort, third effort, whatever, came down here. But as they started to sell US dollar off, again, if you look at that, it's 12 o'clock, time sort of being down the bottom over here. 12 o'clock, they just ran it straight back up to the highs over here. So Aussie, I mean, look, it's one of these things. It's like, I've never seen so many V shapes in my life. Like, it's just unbelievable how many V shapes we've had recently. Like, everything. Buy the dip has been like the play of the day for Aussie for the last, since April. Well, including April. April was a big one where we sort of just dropped 500 points or something. But yeah, it's sort of every single chance they get, they sort of buy it. So look, I put a post up because I had the three levels that I was looking at yesterday. I should put on that other chart. 1, 2, and 3. And we were coming down into it. So we took out this first level here, which is fine because this is the back test level. We saw this as it sort of popped through, back test here, slightly deeper, but still back test, popped up over here. It's still the level for them to hold. But as you can see, there's obviously still some interest in the Aussie, even sort of given all the stuff. And even with this bit of data that we've just had out now, it hasn't really sort of affected it too much. I mean, look, it's rolling over a little bit from its highs, but it's not really much to sort of say, you know what I mean? It's really just consolidating around the highs. I think if you do take out those lows, so 55.40s, same sort of thing from yesterday. I think the 20s is going to play their part. 65 is the round number, is going to be interesting. Up to 65, 65.10, this kind of zone through here, which you can see was the top of this little consolidation period that we had. Going back, what's that, 2 weeks or so now? Week and a half. So look, there's definitely levels for the buyers to sort of hold, should it sort of come back down over here. Again, look, it's just the tail end of what's going to happen with the US dollar. If they decide to sort of squeeze it up a bit, Aussie's obviously going to feel a pinch. I think the big thing is for me anyway, is where Aussie's going to close the week. If it can close the week up in the 65s again, I think that sort of holds pretty good that, because this is a big resistance level. It's worked so hard to get above it. It needs to hold above it. So it needs to hold and sort of close really up in the high 65s. But I would say anywhere up in this area over here for a close. Where's the thing going? That area there. I think this is where it needs to close the week. If it closes outside this level here, sorry, I was distracted. If it closes outside this level here, I think that you may sort of see this thing sort of fail a little bit. But for the time being, I mean, it's a sniff from its highs. It's only marginally pulling back. We had sort of slightly weaker China data. We had weak Aussie data. It's barely affected it at all. So I think sort of maybe sort of a little bit of sort of cooling through the session. But again, look, if that data comes in rubbish, I imagine it just a springboard back up here. And as I said, there's not really too much tomorrow because you got that Independence Day. So I imagine there's going to be fairly subdued close to the week. So I wouldn't be surprised if it sort of just hangs around these areas here to the idea of maybe it potentially breaking out to the top side. Short term, maybe a move back down to the 60s. We know the 60s is always a fairly strong level with Aussie. So we'll see how that goes through the session. Gold attempted its breakout. A little bit of a flag set up here. Back test, beautiful. Started to move up here, but as I said, as soon as Asia opened this morning, it's just got hammered. So it's back testing this sort of horizontal we've got sort of currently. The fact that it sort of got smacked on open's a bit interesting. I think that people attribute that to that sort of trade deal with Vietnam. because obviously sort of gold's a bit more of a sort of hedge against the tariffs and all that kind of stuff. Seems to be running a little bit with the US dollar at the moment though, so probably sort of wearing a little bit more of the risk off sort of hat. So we'll see how that goes again. Obviously appreciated fairly well as uh, US dollar was getting sold off. US dollar hasn't done anything this morning, and it's excuse me sold down, but we're seeing a little bit of a push on the US dollar at the moment, and obviously a little bit of a push on gold. So we'll see how this goes. I think if we can hold this level here, because obviously it was a little bit of a resistance here. It's been at support here. I think if you break down underneath this, um, I think underneath sort of 39, or call it 40, whatever. If you get down underneath here, then you're probably coming back just down to the low 30s. But again, just really sort of consolidating this area up over the top over here. If you do get down underneath 28, then I could see possibly, we're going to maybe sort of come back down to these sort of lower levels over here, maybe around test that 3,300 kind of level for now. Just got to see, is this just like a little flare up to then sort of roll over and then go back down, or is it just going to be everything else V-shaped status and sort of keep on moving on? If you take out the highs, really, you're probably looking at 34, I would say, back up around this 33.90 kind of thing if you do take out sort of 66. So it's just a question of whether this is just going to come up here and then roll over for another leg down, or whether they're going to V-shape it back up over here. Is it expected to see a little bit of a response from this level? As I said, this is resistance, now it's support. But yeah, a bit of a question as to sort of whether this just goes in. The RSI looks like it might want to sort of go down a little bit lower as well. US dollars are catching a small bid at the moment as well. Silver, stubbornly strong. It's just, look, it's a bit hard to call this thing. Look, it kind of did break out, got smacked on open as well. But should this be a bit of a channel here? Let's update this a little bit. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about silver. Like, you know what I mean? It's super strong buying down here. It's slowly having lower highs over here, but really you can't really say much more than it's just consolidating. You know what I mean? It really is just sort of holding this whole sort of area here. Um, Look, again, till it sort of gets down underneath 35, I'm not really interested in it. Um, you know what I mean? I missed this big push up over here. This is just garbage to trade. I don't want to buy it into 14-year resistance levels, even if it is just consolidating at the highs. I'm still in the belief that US dollar will get a little bit of a push, which makes me reluctant to buy these things. So yeah, look, until it's underneath 35, I'm just going to keep it on the back burner for now. But yeah, certainly I still think that you may potentially get this move down here, but you've got to respect the fact that it's incredibly stubbornly strong. Copper, there's another one that just keeps breaking out higher and higher. As I said, this is very copper-esque of these kind of moves that like it'll have a bit of a channel, it'll fake out, and then what does it do? It goes up and even takes out the highs again. So it must be moving on to sort of near all-time highs. I mean, it's still a little bit of a way off. That was a big big sort of capitulation. This one here, that move up there, boom. But yeah, look again. It's one of those ones that's sort of like, tried to sort of get the trade the downside, tried to trade the downside. And I haven't traded copper for a while. And yes, it just keeps grinding up and up and up and up and up and up. So it's one of these things like, I mean, it's like that sort of age-old saying, like the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay liquid. That's fine. That's kind of the idea if you're holding on to shorts all the way through here, just in the idea that we were coming back down over here, because that was what the plan was. But I think with a lot of these things, particularly if you look at the equity markets, silver as well, now copper, these sort of things, a lot of people were expecting this stuff to sort of come back down here. Maybe they're like, oh, this is just a flare up and it's going to come back down. And for a part it did, but then it's just gone on and on and on. It's gone even steeper on its own little tangent up over the top. I don't know. Look, I don't trust these moves, but I don't want to sort of necessarily stand in its way. So look, till it gets back down under here, same with silver. I'm not really interested with it. It's too high to buy and it's too strong moving up to short. So again, I think sort of copper's just on the back burner till we sort of actually get a little bit of cooling off coming down here. But it's gone strength to strength certainly at the moment. And China, just to finish off, again, look, it's just found itself in little things. Definitely got resistance at this sort of level here, the 717. It is coming to a little bit of a point. The main sort of thing I'm looking at with this, obviously, is this wedge. It doesn't really seem to be sort of resolving itself at all. It did look a little bit better, but every time it looks a little bit better, some data comes out, US dollar gets sold off across the board, and bang, it's straight back down. So really, as you can see, it's just dribbling, but I think we are coming to a point soon. So this level here, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then if we can get the break, that's the move that we're kind of looking for here. But again, it's just waiting game. Okay, how long can the market stay grinding in one direction? Well, probably a very long time. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, look, these are the kind of things you just got to wait till you hit those sort of alerts, and then we can sort of say, okay, how can we act with that? Because this is just, I mean, look, this is always a tedious pair, but once it moves, I think it'll move fairly quickly. But again, the question is just how long till that point. So not super exciting with a lot of the charts at the moment. Just sort of waiting on things really. All right, cool. That's it from me.